There is a kind of person who is extraordinarily well-read and almost impossible to surprise, who can locate any new idea inside a framework they already possess, file it under a thinker they've already encountered, and return it to you with a reference that demonstrates they knew this territory first. They are not dismissive, they are genuinely engaged. They listen carefully and respond thoughtfully. And the conversation, despite this, goes nowhere new. Something in the exchange is being received but not absorbed. Something is landing and immediately being made familiar, made safe, made continuous with what was already there. You may have recognized someone just now, or you may have recognized yourself briefly and uncomfortably, and then found a reason why the description doesn't quite fit. That reflex, the one that arrived the moment the description pointed at you, is the mechanism, not the belief that you've stopped growing. The belief is almost certainly absent. People who have stopped growing almost never experience it as stopping. They experience it as arriving, as having done the work, as being finally in a place of genuine understanding from which the frantic absorption of earlier years is no longer necessary because the fundamentals are now in place. The fundamentals are always in place. The fundamentals have been in place for years. And the last genuinely difficult idea, the one that arrived without a filing cabinet waiting for it, that produced real disorientation rather than the pleasant friction of complication, was longer ago than you would be comfortable saying out loud. This is not about intelligence. The person this describes is often exceptionally intelligent. Intelligence, it turns out, is one of the most efficient mechanisms for not being changed by what you encounter, because it permits you to understand something without it costing you anything. You can follow an argument all the way to its conclusion and emerge from it exactly as you were. You can be moved by an idea in the sense of admiring its architecture, recognizing its precision, appreciating its implications, and not be moved by it in the sense that actually matters. Understanding is not the same as being altered, and the person who has stopped growing has, somewhere along the way, learned to do the former at the expense of the latter. What becomes possible when you can see this mechanism clearly is not a return to the anxiety of not knowing. That phase had its own problems. It is something more precise, the ability to distinguish between understanding and encountering, between the fluency that signals mastery and the fluency that signals that you have stopped being moved. To notice the moment an idea goes from lived to filed, and in noticing it, to have some choice about whether to let it. The specific behavior I want to name, the one that has probably been operating in you for longer than you'd like to consider, is the comfort of the frame, not the frame itself, the comfort of it. The specific relief that arrives when a genuinely new thing presents itself and you are able to locate it inside something you already know. When you hear a claim and your mind immediately produces the thinker who said something adjacent, the concept that contains this one, the critique that applies. The satisfaction of that location is real. It feels like recognition. It feels like depth. What it actually is, what it has been in many of the cases where you've experienced it, is the successful avoidance of being genuinely affected, because the genuinely new idea does not arrive already filed. It arrives as disorientation, as a period of not knowing where to put it, as a quality of exposure, the mind briefly without its scaffolding, required to hold something it doesn't yet have a structure for. Most people experience this as bad thinking, as confusion, as the mark of someone who hasn't yet done enough reading to understand what they're encountering. And so they read more and they build more scaffolding, and they become better and better at preventing the experience of genuine disorientation, which is the experience of genuine encounter. And they call this growth. It is not growth. It is the progressive refinement of a defense. If this channel gives you something you can't easily dismiss, subscribe. That's the only thing that keeps this work going. The defense, the comfort of the frame, the immediate filing of the new, is not pathological in its origins. William James, who thought about the mechanics of mind more precisely than almost anyone before the 20th century, described habit as the flywheel of civilization, the force that makes action automatic and therefore efficient, that allows the self to carry forward what it has already learned without having to relearn it from scratch with every encounter. Habit is how the organism conserves energy. It is how fluency is built. It is why you can read these sentences without consciously assembling each word. But James also identified the dark side of the same mechanism. Habit, he observed, is laid down not only by what we practice, but by what we encounter repeatedly and survive. The mind that has processed a category of experience enough times begins to process it automatically, which means below the level of consciousness, which means without genuine encounter, which means with the full efficiency and zero cost of a reflex. And the mind that processes everything through existing habit is a mind that is, in a very precise sense, closed. Not to information, information still arrives. Closed to alteration. Closed to the possibility of being genuinely changed by what it receives. James was specific about the mechanism by which this happens. He described the self as layered, a material self, a social self, a spiritual self, and he noted that each layer forms its own habits, its own grooves of automatic response, its own ways of converting new material into familiar conformation. The intellectual self is no different. It forms habits of interpretation. It develops preferred frameworks, favored thinkers, grooves of analysis that have been used often enough to become reflex. And then it uses those grooves for everything, not because they are always the right tool, but because the habitual is always more accessible than the genuinely new. What James meant by the flywheel was that habit carries civilizations forward, that without the automatic, the organism would be paralyzed by the cost of deliberate choice at every moment. But a flywheel, by definition, resists change in direction. It is good at maintaining momentum. It is not good at turning. And the mind that has accumulated enough habitual frameworks to process most of what it encounters automatically has become, in some precise sense, a flywheel. It moves efficiently. It does not turn. James meant this as a description of aging in the psychological rather than the biological sense. He was writing about the point at which a person's character becomes fixed, not through dramatic decision, but through the slow accretion of automatic response. The moment when the person stops being shaped by their experience and starts simply confirming it. And he was clear, in a way that has not been widely absorbed, that this moment does not announce itself. It does not feel like closing. It feels like stability. Nietzsche's analysis is sharper and more uncomfortable because it targets not the mechanism, but the story the mechanism tells about itself. He identified what he called the will to power, a phrase that has been almost universally misread as a drive toward domination, when what Nietzsche actually meant was something closer to the drive towards self-overcoming. The will to power, properly understood, is not the desire to control others. It is the desire to exceed yourself, to encounter your own limits and push through them, to become something you were not, rather than confirm something you already are. It is the drive that makes genuine growth possible. And Nietzsche was explicit that it requires a particular kind of courage, the courage to be disturbed by what you encounter, to not immediately domesticate it into what you already know. What happens when this drive fails? When the self-overcoming becomes too costly? When the disorientation of genuine encounter becomes intolerable? Is that the will to power does not disappear. It finds a substitute. And the substitute Nietzsche identified was mastery of the existing territory. Not the expansion of the self, but the increasing refinement of what the self already contains. You stop encountering the genuinely new and begin instead to deepen your command of the familiar. You become more fluent, more assured, more capable of producing what you already know quickly and well. And you experience this, Nietzsche would say, as wisdom, because from the inside, the cessation of genuine encounter looks exactly like having found what was worth finding. The mind that has stopped being disturbed interprets its own lack of disturbance as evidence of depth. It mistakes the absence of challenge for the presence of understanding. This is what Nietzsche meant by the last man, not a political figure, but a psychological type. The one who has made himself comfortable, who blinks, who says, "We have invented happiness." The last man is not stupid, he is satisfied. And satisfaction, Nietzsche was arguing, is the most lethal thing that can happen to a mind. And the stopped mind will defend this interpretation, will explain, will contextualize, will produce increasingly sophisticated accounts of why the challenging thing is not, on examination, challenging, with the same intelligence it once used to encounter new territory. The sophistication of the defense is not evidence against the diagnosis. It is the diagnosis. The place this shows up that people least expect, and where it does the most damage, is not in the obvious cases of intellectual rigidity. It is in the therapeutic and psychological frameworks people use to understand themselves. This is the specific, unexpected application, because the person who has done serious psychological work, who has read widely, who has been in therapy or analysis, who has spent real time and effort understanding the mechanisms that drive their behavior, is often the most protected person in the room, not because their understanding is false, because their understanding is real and has become a frame so well established, so thoroughly inhabited, that it now functions as a defense rather than an opening. They can explain their patterns, they can name their defenses, they can trace their relational dynamics to their origins with considerable precision. And this explanatory fluency, which feels like growth, which was growth at the moment it was being built, has become the thing that prevents the next growth. Because the next growth would require something that does not fit the existing psychological framework, something that the framework cannot absorb without being revised. And the revision of a framework that has been the primary tool of self-understanding for years feels from the inside not like growth, but like regression, like giving up something real, like a threat to the self that the framework was supposed to illuminate. So the framework becomes permanent, and the person who built it calls themselves self-aware and is not lying, and is also not growing. They are administering a map of a territory they no longer visit. What is particular about this case, what makes it different from ordinary intellectual rigidity, is that the framework being protected is specifically about the self. It is not just a way of understanding the world. It is a way of understanding the person who is doing the understanding. And so the threat posed by new psychological insight is not merely intellectual, it is existential. The framework doesn't just organize information, it organizes identity. To give it up even partially is to be temporarily less coherent as a person, less able to explain yourself to yourself, less able to narrate your own interior with the fluency that has become, over time, the primary proof of your psychological seriousness. This is the place where the stopped person is most completely stopped and most completely unable to see it. Because the defense wears the face of the achievement, the very sophistication that signals the problem is the same sophistication that has been, in every other context, the evidence of genuine work. From the inside, it is indistinguishable, which means that the stopped person's sincere conviction that they are still growing is not dishonesty. It is the final product of a mechanism that has been running long enough to have become invisible. What makes this genuinely difficult to address, more difficult than simple intellectual closure, is that the experience of the stopped person is not the experience of someone who has closed. It is the experience of someone who has arrived. The difference between wisdom and stagnation from the inside is imperceptible. Both feel like the absence of unnecessary disturbance. Both involve a kind of fluency with existing ideas. Both produce the capacity to engage with new material by locating it within what is already known. The only reliable distinction is behavioral, not what you believe about your openness, but what your response to genuine disturbance actually looks like in practice. Not the ideas that excite you. Excitement is compatible with zero growth, because what excites you is usually what confirms you. But the ideas that make you slightly angry, that feel unfair, that you find yourself explaining away before you fully heard them, that produce the specific quality of resistance that is not intellectual disagreement, but something more personal, more threatened, more interested in being right than in being changed. Frankl, writing from a context that was extreme enough that his insights carry a different weight than most, made a claim about the space between stimulus and response, the gap in which, he argued, human freedom lives. What he meant was not merely that we choose our reactions. He meant that the capacity to inhabit that gap, to actually pause, actually remain in the space of not knowing before the reflex fires, is a developmental achievement, not a default state. Most people do not have access to it most of the time. The reflex is faster than the pause. The filing happens before the encounter can complete. Frankl's specific claim was that this capacity, the capacity to pause, to remain genuinely undecided in the space between encountering something and responding to it, is what allows meaning to emerge rather than merely be confirmed. Without the gap, you do not experience anything. You confirm your experience of it. The encounter becomes a mirror. You see yourself seeing it. But the specific situation where this gap collapses most completely, where the reflex fires fastest and most invisibly, is not in moments of stress or danger. It is in moments of intellectual encounter. The idea that challenges the framework produces, in milliseconds, the response that protects the framework. And that response wears the face of thought. It produces reasons, it produces counter-arguments, it produces citations. It looks from the outside and from the inside like engagement. The gap never opened. The encounter never happened. The person emerged from the exchange exactly as they entered it and felt that this was because they had understood it. Camus wrote about the absurd as the fundamental condition of consciousness, the collision between the human desire for clarity and the world's refusal to provide it. His particular argument was that the properly human response to this collision is not resolution, but rebellion, the ongoing refusal to accept false certainty, to pretend the collision has been resolved when it has only been managed. What he was pointing at is structurally identical to what happens in the mind that has stopped growing. The stopped mind has resolved the absurd. It has found a framework, usually a good one, usually one that genuinely illuminated something real at the time it was found, and it has decided that the framework is sufficient. The collision between the desire for understanding and the intractability of experience has been managed into something that looks like resolution. And Camus would say, this is the philosophical equivalent of what he called philosophical suicide, the leap into certainty that ends the confrontation with genuine difficulty by pretending the difficulty has been answered. The mind that is still genuinely alive to its own encounter with the world is not comfortable. It holds its frameworks provisionally. It knows the difference between a map and the territory. It can say without excessive drama, I do not know what to make of this, and it can sit with not knowing for longer than is convenient. This capacity, not the accumulation of knowledge, not the refinement of existing understanding, but the ability to remain genuinely uncertain in the presence of something that has not yet been absorbed, is the only reliable signal that something is still happening. Not the size of the library, not the sophistication of the analysis, not the quality of the references, whether you can be genuinely not knowing in the presence of something new. The growth that people mean when they say they value growth is almost always the additive kind. More information, more sophisticated frameworks, deeper reading, a richer vocabulary for existing categories. This is not nothing. But it is not the only kind, and it is the kind most compatible with the experience of stopping. The other kind, the kind that actually changes the shape of the self rather than the size of its content, requires loss, not symbolic loss, actual loss, of a framework that organized a significant portion of your self-understanding, of an identity built around a particular way of knowing, of the fluency that comes from years of inhabiting a particular set of ideas. This kind of growth feels, while it is happening, like collapse, like a period of genuine confusion that has no guaranteed resolution, like being less capable than you were before, temporarily, because what you were capable of has been destabilized, and what will replace it is not yet formed. The person who values growth without being willing to experience this specific kind of cost does not actually value growth. They value the credential of growth. They value what growth confers, the identity of someone who takes their inner life seriously, who doesn't get stuck, who continues to develop, without being willing to undergo the specific experience that credential is supposed to mark. Most people will do almost anything to avoid this, and they can, successfully, for decades. Because the additive kind of growth provides real returns, real increases in sophistication, in articulateness, in the ability to navigate familiar terrain with greater skill. And those returns are indistinguishable from the inside, from the returns of genuine transformation. The person who has been doing only additive growth for 15 years does not feel like someone who has avoided something. They feel like someone who has worked very hard at something real. They have. The question is only whether what they've built has become the thing they're now hiding behind. There is no comfortable place to land in this recognition that is not an accident of the topic, it is the topic. The question that this script has been building toward is not, are you still growing? Because almost everyone believes the answer is yes, and the belief itself is part of the structure being examined. The question is, when was the last time you encountered something that made your existing framework genuinely insufficient? Not complicated, not challenged. Insufficient. When was the last time the encounter produced real disorientation rather than the pleasure of sophisticated engagement? When was the last time you emerged from an idea as a slightly different person rather than a more confirmed one? If the honest answer is that you cannot remember, that is not a condemnation. It is a location. It tells you where you are with more honesty than almost anything else you could know about yourself. And knowing where you are is the only precondition for being somewhere else. The mechanism will not dissolve through effort. Trying harder to be open is not access to openness. It is the performance of openness, which the mechanism is perfectly capable of providing without cost. What shifts it is exposure, deliberate, uncomfortable, sustained exposure to exactly the kind of encounter the mechanism has been filtering out. Not the ideas you find stimulating, the ideas you find slightly threatening. Not the frameworks that extend your existing understanding, the ones that make it seem, for a moment, inadequate. This cannot be engineered from within the framework being protected. The person who has decided to seek out challenging ideas has made that decision using the existing framework, which means the search will be filtered by the same mechanism that made the search necessary. What you select as challenging will tend to be what challenges you in the ways you have already learned to absorb. The genuinely challenging thing is not what you would identify as such in advance. It is what you encounter and find yourself immediately needing to explain away. Watch for the explaining away. That is the signal, not the intellectual discomfort. The intellectual discomfort you can manage. You have been managing it for years with increasing sophistication. The explaining away is faster than the discomfort. It is the motion that happens before you've acknowledged what arrived. When you notice that motion, the immediate reaching for a frame that contains this, the rapid production of a thinker who already said it better, that is the moment. Not to abandon the frame, to stay in the encounter long enough to actually feel it before the frame arrives. That moment of inadequacy is not failure. It is the only evidence that something is still capable of reaching you.